Hello, task 4. Let's start with question 1. How can we bring about culture shift within educational systems to bring about purposeful and sustainable data use to inform evidence-based decisions? So I have highlighted what I think the keywords are, and that's culture shift, and then purposeful and sustainable, and then obviously decision makers. I want to answer this question as if we are the decision makers. I think it only has relevance if you answer it like that. So first of all, let's address the culture shift. Culture shift is change. Change is uncomfortable. It is human nature to try and retain the status quo. So you are going to do your level best in your capacity, whatever that capacity is to hold on to what's normal for you. So change is not easy for anyone. And there are very few of us that just flat out embrace change. So we have to acknowledge that change is uncomfortable and therefore it's not going to come easily. I do think, though, there are strategic moves that you can use to bring about a cultural change in any kind of educational setting. And I have identified 5 of those with a bonus extra one. The first one is that you need to involve not just the decision makers, but the decision implementers in your plan. Even if you have a secret agenda and even if you know what the outcome already is, you need to involve everyone, because surprises like these don't go down well in a staff room. So I would suggest an open table discussion, get everyone around, talk about the purpose, explain the why, because the power of why is so very important when you're trying to get buy-in for anything, really. So explain the why and explain the benefits. The second point is that you have to lead by example. So if you are preaching making decisions using data, you can't then make a decision on the fly based on what you think the data might say, because then you are contradicting yourself. The third point is to remain consistent. So if you, as the decision makers, are not consistent in your approach and in your reasons for making decisions, your endeavor is going to fall flat. It will be cut off at the knees. And then, so I lied, I have 4 and an extra one. My fourth one is that you need to be able to show evidence of what you have done. So if you are proposing X, Y, and Z change based on data, based on information that you've gathered, and then you can prove how it has been successful, perhaps in the following course or in the following cohort, you will then win over people, because then change is evident and it's not just Gail's approach to making decisions. It's we saw this data, we were all involved, we implemented this change, and now look at what the outcome is. So it becomes a lot more believable. And my bonus point is that, and I believe this is inherent to any in industry. It's not educational, it's not private, it's not public, but this kind of change comes from the top. The biggest cheese in your site, like nameless, faceless boards, those guys, they're great scapegoats, but they don't really count. The biggest cheese that you can see, that person needs to adopt the change that they are trying to bring about in their culture. So if that person adopts using data to make decisions and shows that making decisions based on data was effective, then you will win 4 out of 5 times, possibly 5 out of 5 times, if everyone sticks to my points. 2. Can educational data provide a real-time alternative to temporally discrete assessment techniques and bureaucratic policy making? Yes, it can, but I picked this question because I had no idea what temporally based assessment was, and after a large web search, I think I'm a little bit clearer, and for the sake of this question, I hope I understood it. Temporally based assessment is based on so the word comes from your temples, what's around you. So temporally discrete assessment is it's what you know. It's like your gut feeling based on your here and your now in your classroom. So you just this kid's going to pass, or he's going to fail, and it's kind of the antonym of big data. That's how I understood it. I hope it's right. And the more I thought about this question, the more it became one of my favorite questions. Okay, I've only asked them 2, but it's my favorite question so far. So the answer to the question is yes, but it's a yes but. And I draw the parallels between public and private. Phase independent. Public education, private education. So let's visualize this with me. I see in public education, I see this huge big hamster wheel with this big bad boy grandfather hamster on it, and he's going for it. He's going at one speed and he's going. And throw everything you want at him, he's going, it bounces off him, nothing sticks, he's going. He's got the reputation, everyone knows about the hamster in the hamster wheel. Basically, you could just refer to his acronym, HIHW, hamster in a hamster wheel, and people are like, oh yeah, I know about the hamster. I once knew someone who visited the hamster. And that's your public educational sector. Then your private educational sector, imagine all those little cogs that are interconnected, like a little cog and a big cog, and they're like touching, and you turn the little cog here, and they're all turning, and even this one up here, he's turning. But they turn quick. Turn it quick, everyone turns quick. Turn it slow, everyone turns slow. And that's how I see the private educational sector. And both with negatives, both with positives. But to answer this specific question, my yes but is that the hamster runs slower in public institutions. So the data is being gathered, it's being accumulated, it's all there, but it's slow to bring change. Again, both pros and cons. I mean, it's stable, you're not going to make any off-the-fly decisions, and it's safe. Then your turny cogs are turning and they're gathering data, and quickly, we need to spin faster. So we turn them faster and everyone goes faster, and it's this ripple effect, and it's just working. And again, pros and cons. Can move really fast, like a little speedboat, but maybe too fast, and sometimes make really bad decisions without thinking about the consequences. So my yes but answer speaks to the really big places, because look, in independent schools and tertiary institutions are small, hey? And because they are, I suppose, in direct competition with each other, it's not a sharing is caring game. Whereas with public institutions, it's all owned by the government, and therefore sharing is kind of mandatory. So I feel like big boys, like, who owns the IIE? Advitech. Big boys like Advitech, I mean, they have access to data from Crawford schools, Kuro schools, Vega, no longer DSSA, but they have access to so many pools of data that they are becoming big data players. So now you've got the hamster that everyone knows, the hamster that people don't maybe know yet, because he wears many different hats and has many different names. But, and for better or worse, let's see it play out, bureaucratic decision-making in an institution like Advitech would be much faster and a lot more immediate to implement. So that, I'll give you an example quickly. We, in the last, call it 3 years, were able to implement a new software system that industry was asking for. So our students in the built environment, everyone uses AutoCAD. That's the industry standard. And all the software that mimics AutoCAD is based on AutoCAD because that's the one to do. I mean, it's a bit like Photoshop in the world of the built environment. And in about 2005, Revit hit the scenes. And Revit was the thing, but everyone was retraining their drawing offices to use Revit, and Revit was still very, very new. And in the last kind of 3 years, Revit has replaced AutoCAD. But educational institutions are a bit slow to catch up. So what we've managed to do within the last 3 years is phase out AutoCAD almost completely. To the point where they can draw the basics and like ask for directions and where's the toilet. But they can do the basics, but Revit is now the main focus, which is what employers are looking for in the built environment. And this is something that we've been able to pull off very quickly. I mean, it's taken 3 years to phase in, but compared to the big hamster, that's quick. And now our students learn Revit almost exclusively, and that's what is asked of them in industry. So that's just one example that I can think of very quickly in where my version of big data has made a change very quickly in my world because I could, whereas perhaps and has replaced the temporal discrete assessment making that happened previously because it was just as quick. Done.
Question 7. How do you see your exposure in this module to large-scale data sets or bases informing your continued development as a thought leader and emerging scholar in the field of ICT in education? Okay, so I've taken this question apart into 4 phrases or key terms. And the first is personal experience. The second is continuing development. The third, thought leader. And the fourth, emerging scholar. Now this is my personal hand. This is personal experience and emerging scholar. This is how I interpret things. It's contextual, it's emotional, it's me. So let that person leave the building. These two, I have continued development and thought leader. And I feel like these two are the most important two in this question. Because the question says, hey Gail, your experience in this module, how's it going to change your life? And the reason I've retained these two is because, so in my research for the last module and this module, I listened to the World Economic Forum's 4th Industrial Revolution podcast. And in one of those episodes, they interviewed a guy called, I forget his first name, but his surname's Mirta, M-I-R-T-A. And his analogy of education comes down to a suitcase. He says you have a suitcase, you pack it for 12 years, and off you go. Take your suitcase, go on your journey, live your life based on your suitcase. But this analogy can only work if the world remains the same during the packing of your suitcase and during the using of your suitcase. If the world changes, which it's doing now, it doesn't work like that. So you have no other option but to be a continuing, developing educator. You are a lifelong learner. You have to be a lifelong learner. And I pair that with thought leader because you can't be a thought leader unless you are A, informed, and B, critical. And if I'm going to use large data sets to make a difference in my life, I'm continuously developing. So everything I see, I take in and I pin it to something I already know. I build on information I already have. So I'm cascading my knowledge and my learning as I go. So I'm taking in large data sets. I'm seeing large data sets. And that in turn is informing my ability to be a thought leader. Because now I'm informed, therefore I can be critical. So in answer to my question, in answer to the question, I say that large data sets, for me, provide me with tangible data to base a decision on, which previously I might have used my temporal discrete assessment to base decisions, learning decisions, decisions about curriculum, decisions that influence my students or my department. I would have maybe based that on a bit of feedback and gut feeling, where now I know better because I'm better informed, and I feel like I can gather that information, I can structure that information, I can draw conclusions from that information, and my decision-making process is now more informed, which is how this module will have affected me as a thought leader and emerging scholar. Thank you. Question 9. Many teachers do not feel engaged or listened to when it comes to decisions that affect their classrooms. How can policymakers change that? Or should we? I have picked this question specifically because I've been on both sides of the table. And I am currently of the opinion that we shouldn't change that, and I'll tell you why. Let's be teachers. You're in your classroom, you are 100% present in your classroom. You are giving it your all, you are invested in your students, you have every single one of them at your heart, you know who the problem kids are, you know why they are problems, you know what you need to do to fix them. Let's be good teachers. You want to help them, you're prepared to do what it takes to help them. And you are going to fight for your class at that point in time as hard as you can fight. So if you need to slow the curriculum down, if you need alternative assessment, if you need different furniture, pink paint on the walls, you are going to fight for that because that is what your class needs to succeed. And I believe that is a teacher's job. A teacher is going to do their level best to do right by their students. And each group of students in isolation. As a policymaker, you are not going to look at the students in isolation, which you shouldn't be doing. You shouldn't be looking at each class in isolation because you are going big picture. You're using data to make decisions. You are using the model child, the average curriculum, the average classroom, everything on average because that's your job. And I don't think, while I don't think that, you should be at opposite ends of the table, policymaker, teacher, I don't think that there's a successful resolution, and I don't think that there should be. Because let's say, okay, let's play it out. Let's bring all the teachers and all the policymakers into a room. Dear teachers, this is why we make policy, this is how we make policy. So either the teachers understand and they go, why, thank you very much, and then they will stop fighting for their students in context that, for each and every class in the context in which the class is at, because they're going to see the bigger picture and they're going to go, actually, in the bigger picture, this one group that seems to have a lot of ADD kids, let's not make changes for them. Let's just get them through the system because it's better for the greater good. Or your policymakers are going to sit in the meeting, the teachers are going to explain what the problem is, and the policymakers go, oh, I'd never thought about that. Okay, let's treat each class individually. And that can't work for the most obvious of reasons. So if you've ever been on both sides of the table, I think you will realize that both sides of the table are right. And both sides of the table are doing what they need to do to keep the machine going. So I don't think that we should all be besties and get along and have the same priorities in our hearts, because then we won't be good at our jobs. I suppose if you wanted to minimize the feeling of not being engaged with or not being listened to, the only way you can do that is by holding meetings to say, this is what we think we want to do, what do you think? Even if you know in your heart of policy heart makers that you are not going to take your teachers into consideration, there's a lot of emotional validation that comes when you think you are being listened to. So I think any joining of the teacher policymaker minds happens strategically, and I don't think in a fairy tale they live happily together ever after, and I wouldn't want them to, because policymakers need to be policymakers and teachers need to be teachers, and I value each of them for that reason. Done. Question number 10. Who has made all the difference in your journey? And sprinkle your answer liberally with context. Before I answer this question, I would like to put the module into context. So this is not what I would default to in terms of research, data gathering, processing. I think that the way I live my life and the values that I have in my life probably align more with qualitative data collection, analysis, usage, implementation methods than it does with quantitative data collection, analysis, and usage methods. So this module was a bit of a stretch. It hasn't been awful. I've actually learned a lot. I can kick and whine and moan for the first team, but I've learned a lot, and it really has impacted a lot. It's linked up with things that I already know. Just this morning I was sitting in a development meeting, and we were talking about software called Tableau and how Tableau plugs into data sets and can draw reports, and I understood what it meant. Where maybe 4 months ago, in fact at the beginning of the year, I didn't know what Tableau was. I didn't understand what plugging into data sets meant. So it has probably not changed who I am, but it has definitely augmented my understanding of data gathering, data analysis, data usage, and I think to a large part made me more sensitive to alternative ways of informing decision making. So when it comes to people that I think have made the difference in my journey, there are 2 people that come to mind. So most obviously it's Duan, and I would like to use an example of one of our classes, perhaps the second or third last class, where Duan was showing us sharing a screen on Excel and how he had built that tool that drew data across different sheets. And it was so amazing for me. I was busy watching on my phone with my ears in, and it was so amazing for me that I got my husband to pause the TV so that I could unplug the ears and show him the screen, and we sat watching the lecture together, because it was just so amazing for me that Duan does magic on Excel. I understand him wanting to marry Excel. He's particularly good at it. And you know, that kind of passion, it bleeds through subject matter that might not be your favorite subject matter. So that has definitely been one of the motivators to get me through this course. And the second motivator that got me through this course is my mate Celeste. Celeste and I have become besties. We've never even met in real life, but we will. So we've become besties, and Celeste is an absolute hoot. She is, and I've never met her in real life, she is digitally the epitome of a grade 1 teacher. She's permanently got her pom-poms out. She's permanently pushing you to do your best, believing in you. Every time we get marks back, she will praise my marks and tell me how wonderful I've done. And having someone like that in your study life is so unbelievably motivating. So I have tried very hard to help her in return, because there's definitely something like English privilege, like white privilege in your life. There's a thing like English privilege in our academic lives. And it's just that much easier for someone whose first language is English to write a coherent paper and to string words together and to form sentences that make sense in our heads instantly as they come out of our mouths.
So what Celeste and I have started doing is she sends me some of her journals, and she sends me some of her papers, and then I will make corrections to them or tell her how she could have said things better or structured things better, especially when it comes to she gets quite high plagiarism scores. So we've been working on that, and I think it's a great relationship because she's just the most positive person in the whole world, and I want to be able to give back to her because I don't think she has any idea how inspiring she is to have around. And that is the end of task 4.